Welcome to the Westminster Tradition, a podcast with lessons for the public service. I'm Alison Lloyd-Wright, Managing Director of the Good Trouble Group and a recovering public servant. And joining me today on Ghana land are my fellow recovering public servants, Caroline Crozer-Barlow.
Hello, Alison.
And Danielle Elston, Managing Director of Good Government Advisory.
Hello, Alison.
This episode, we're not talking about corruption or compliance. We're going to talk about convenience, culture and a contested idea, working from home. Because whether it was an opposition policy quickly walked back after an enormous backlash or tabloid headlines about public servants in their pyjamas, flexible work has become a very visible fault line. How did we get here though? What was the situation pre-COVID, post-COVID, and where are we going? So before the pandemic, when work from home was rare and risky, Danielle, you were granted 1 day a week to work from home more than a decade before the pandemic. What happened?
Yes, I was. So I was coming back from maternity leave and I came back early at the request. And I was fine to come back early because I was really bored. But as a part of that negotiating to come back 4 months early, I wanted a work from home day. And so it took like a long time to negotiate and everyone thought I was from outer space and all of those kinds of things. And I think like my history coming to this, just at this episode is I think because before I came back into the public service, I worked for myself and worked from home when it wasn't really a thing.
Yeah.
I've always been a little bit of a it's easier than you think, or a little bit on the side of exploring it and advancing it, because for 7 years in my 20s, pre like Wi-Fi and Teams and stuff, I did work for myself from home. And so when I came back into the service, this 5 day a week in the office thing was a bit like hard to wrap my head around for things where for parts of the job where you didn't need to be there. So that's fine. So I get this kind of work from home day and then I hang on to that thing for dear life for like 5 years and get terrified when bosses change and all that kind of thing. But like people had a really big problem with it, and I will say men had a really big problem with it. And I had this particular situation where I worked from home on the same day for many, many years. And on my door, and I had a job where you weren't in your office that much anyway, on my door was like, if I'm not here, here's my phone number, like my phone is glued to my hand. And if it's a Wednesday, I work from home. So give me a call. And this one particular colleague would, without fail, my EA used to like set her watch by it, come by, say, oh, is she not here? And she'd say, no, give her a call. As she is every week, mate. And like clockwork, an email would go to the big boss saying, oh, I've got this heavily challenging thing that would have been yesterday or tomorrow as well. So like kind of out of nowhere. I don't know if Danielle's on some kind of leave or just not around today, like all of this stuff. So it was, I found it was a privilege. It was a perk for being a workaholic and being available on a Sunday morning for a crazy idea from a minister, and I had to hang on to it. And I came at it from such a different perspective because I had not, at 32, been in an office 5 days a week since I was 19. Like I had always worked 100 hours a week, but I had not been doing it like this forever. So I had lots of different models in my head compared to other people.
I loved how scarring this was because Danielle and I worked together years later, and I remember coming to your office once and there was this stupid sign on your door, and I'm like, and I literally had texted you, I'm like, what the fuck is that sign all about? And she's like, you will be surprised at how many morons like consistently don't try to contact me even though I am available. And I was like, I had just never occurred to me.
And there are some agencies, and I know the one in particular where the culture of presenteeism was very strong.
Yeah. And I want to get to at some point managing teams where presenteeism had been the previous thing as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So my experience of a pre-COVID workplace flexibility thing was, and actually Danielle, you and I were both doing this at different times, I think, but at Environment before COVID, we went to something called All Roles Flex, or it was like a version, I can't remember what the specific name was. And it was about changing that kind of presumption, right? So the presumption was that if you would go and have a conversation with your boss, but that your boss would look for ways to make it work. It wasn't the same as saying the presumption was you got it unless it was proven otherwise, but that there would be an open conversation about how to make it work. And I think, Environment Department, you've got rangers, You've got fire people, so people who do the seasonal firefighting, which feels to me like an alternative work arrangement, just saying. It's like 1/4 of the year. You've got a whole bunch of people who do quite hands-on operational jobs. And so to make that happen, we had to kind of deploy a really significant amount of kind of conversation at every local team. Like we sent people around the state to sit down and say, actually, what does this look like? And what was interesting is, some teams were completely resistant and there were local managers who were like, this will never work. But there were Rangers teams who were like, so you're saying flexible work is we don't roster everyone on for nights in this particular thing, or there were just ways that they could get around it. And for those teams that could get around it, in particular the fire crew did some really interesting things, they kind of bought into it and led it. Some of the hardest parts were actually back in head office. And, there's one quote, I do remember this one quote where like a very senior executive back in head office said, well, if I can't see them, I don't know what they're doing.
Oh, and that's what people, that's the most
and we heard
common.
that so much during COVID.
Oh my God.
And to be like, I know we're going to get to COVID, but I think COVID in some ways is unhelpful because what you just described, Caroline, was redesigning work. Right?
Yeah, it really was.
Yeah.
We recognise that. This isn't about work from home. It was about
part-time job share.
It was all sorts of things.
It was all sorts of things. And I think that this conversation got crushed, cramped, buggered up by it becoming this blunt force of anyone who worked on a computer-based job, most of them, lots of them who had computer-based jobs, and some of them by law, like all went to work from home, and then were they going to come back? And it was about working from home. And we ended up in the work from home wars. Whereas I feel like just before all of that happened, we were on the cusp of this, how do we design work properly? How does it all kind of operate? And in some ways, like the conversation got, instead of it being a natural progression, the great thing was we discovered there were some things that happened in COVID, but we kind of changed course a little bit. I'm not sure it's helped.
Yeah, so Danielle and I were on a panel for a Women in Leadership Summit with this amazing Professor Carol Kewick. We'll link her in the show notes. And she talked about the importance of autonomy, right? So the question wasn't just where are you working from home or not, but what you got with work from home was a much higher degree of autonomy about which task, in which order, how long you would spend on it. And that is one of the kind of the rub points for, various plans to kind of force people back to the office, is it's not just autonomy about where they're working, but they would have to give up this much greater sense of autonomy about how they are doing their work.
And there's really good evidence, isn't there, when in that the Commonwealth Safe Work, whatever they're called, I always forget, put out a piece of research on minimising likelihood of psychosocial harm. And one of the kind of key things you can do in a team to minimise psychosocial harm is to maximise autonomy.
Absolutely.
Right? So these things are kind of mutually reinforcing, and it's that old school model of command and control and low autonomy is problematic in some ways.
Hugely.
And yet we end up in this like debate just about where you're sitting.
Exactly. My pre-COVID experience was in managing, because I managed regional development, a team of people who were dispersed remotely around their state.
Oh, of course.
So they were in their offices sometimes, and sometimes they were in the field talking to people. But either way, I couldn't see them. And
How
either
did
way,
you know what they were doing, Alison?
I had to kind of have a leadership and management model that included people who I couldn't see in front of me every day. And that's why I guess when COVID happened, and we'll talk about COVID next, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, it's so hard managing via video conferencing. I was like, really? I did it for 3 years and it was fine. You just have to be intentional about your communication with your staff in a way that you don't have to be, when you can just kind of roll out of your office and say, oh, by the way, everyone, can you make sure that,
Yeah, you have to take the leadership bit seriously. You have to think, what are my leadership skills? What am I... Yeah, absolutely.
Flexible work is not good for bad managers and bad leaders.
Completely agree. So then along came COVID. Suddenly working from home wasn't a niche option. It became standard. It might have shown us some of the wrong things, but what were some of the right things that it showed us?
One of the things that I couldn't believe was how much technology was available that we weren't using already.
Yes.
And how rapidly we could deploy it
and
if
how
we had to.
rapidly we could deploy it. And
how much better it got quickly as well.
Yeah.
You know, yeah.
There was one particular issue around our email server. I can't even bother going into it. They fixed it overnight, and that issue had bugged me for like 2 years.
I love this. Exactly. Like if we cared enough, we could make all these things easier and better.
So I think so some of the things that worked was uniformity, and so like. And of course, can I just point out that when we talk about COVID, different jurisdictions did things really, really differently. And so, Victorian teachers taught from home a lot of the time and all of that kind of thing. So it was different in different places. But that we could roll it out at scale. And I think because of the emergency nature of it, explicit rules, explicit ways of doing things kind of all happened really quickly. And so that was one of the things that was excellent, because we're often a bit like muddly and fluffy about how we do things, and we're worried about offending people, whereas we had what do you call it, public health orders, and so like
explicit authorising environment.
The authorising so we moved beyond the side eye and the so and so left early to do the cricket run with their 2 kids to this explicit set of arrangements, which was a level of management clarity and leadership that you don't often get in the public service.
I also think that it was an explicit set of arrangements that were about public good, not individual good.
That's true. It really made it visible to people.
Yes. So staying home was your duty and it was the right thing to do, rather than being a special benefit conferred upon you because
you wanted to do your washing,
had children, or wanted to do the washing, or
No,
I think that was
really
a
agree.
cultural factor that made it much more acceptable.
But that made it really hard if you were in an environment like I was in during COVID. So I was working in the education department in COVID, and in South Australia we closed our schools, I think, for 4 days from memory. Like we essentially didn't close schools at all. And so there was a real tension for us. And in particular, I ran the kind of allied health support area, which don't sit in schools but sit in regional offices. That question of solidarity.
Yeah.
And if you remember how exposed
divisive.
It was so divisive.
So because I worked
full.
on COVID response, I was in the office. I had a special letter saying that even during lockdowns, I was allowed to leave my home to go to the office. And I don't know, a year into it, there was, talk about getting everyone back to the office, and there were lots of posts, and I was looking at some YouTube video where someone was complaining about having to come back to the office, and I inexplicably burst into tears.
Oh, love.
Because I was like, actually, some of us have been doing this whole way through, and it was, arguably more dangerous, and some of us didn't get to stay at home and do our washing. And don't get me wrong, I'm a massive believer in work from home, or work from anywhere really. But the kind of two streams of people was a real issue.
And flexibility generally, as we continue to grapple with this going forward, we can redesign work, and there's lots of things we can look at and I want to talk about, but it's not uniform.
No.
And different jobs allow different things, like outside of COVID and outside of working from home. Just, we do expect our ambulances to turn up on Saturdays and Sundays. Work is designed differently, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that is divisive. And I just don't think we've ever necessarily had a public conversation so much about work like we have in this kind of COVID and post-COVID.
That's true. Yeah.
I think what was interesting to me is we had a chief executive who I'm sure wouldn't mind me reflecting on this, but in education, Rick Purse took really seriously the idea that he didn't want his head office staff to not be in the office. He was like, if I am asking teachers to be in the schools, we will be in the office as an act of solidarity. And at the time, I think I was a bit of a brat about it and didn't love it. But looking back, I think it's the kind of nuanced cultural leadership that actually every flexibility conversation has to have. You have to be thinking about how is this received by my whole workforce. You can't it's never just an individual decision. It is always thinking about how does this make my organisation hum or not.
And yet, that's so interesting. It is an inherently individual like post-COVID, outside of COVID, this whole conversation is actually inherently individual, which is not really how we designed public sector work to start off with, and it's not how our industrial agreements work, and it's not how culturally we operate. We're very merit and fairness and equity.
Yes, we're very standardised.
We're very standardised. That's probably a better way of putting it.
Yeah.
And so this idea that we're moving into a phase of employment where the conversation is about the work and what I need, what I want, and how I can best deliver you that work is inherently individual, which is a bit not how we're built.
Or contextual, maybe not individual, because I think it's about how the individual relates to the whole.
Context, yes.
Right? So I think it's that contextual. It's not rules-based.
One of the things that I thought was really interesting, and we touched on this just before, is the ways in which hybrid working exposed cracks in leadership capability and management capability in particular, in people who had clearly managed and led mostly by feeling like they needed to see what their staff were doing, not what outputs they were creating, but like literally be able to surveil them on the floor of the building. Heard some comments about early in the pandemic, there was some tracking around sick leave. People were taking much less sick leave. And this was interpreted as like, well, clearly those people are in normal times using their sick leave to just skive off from work for a day or two. And I'm like, or we created conditions to stop people getting sick and they work.
Oh, I love that.
I mean, we'll get to this later. And also, we're not just not getting sick, but their mental health and management of chronic disease was suddenly something that could all be done.
But just that it started from this place of scepticism and low trust about the workforce instead of starting. Everybody's skiving and everyone's sitting at home in their pajamas, just wiggling their mouse around. And I found that really troubling. I still do, that's the kind of starting point for some leaders and managers, not I manage grown adults and I can and should trust them.
And I know the work well enough to know whether it's happening or not. Like it's a lack of confidence in knowing what to sniff and smell to know whether the work's happening or not. And I'm like, I would know that whether they're in front of me or not. Like, I also think it showed up it showed up people who didn't like being in their houses, and I don't mean that in relation particularly to people who are in long lockdowns, but there are lots of people for whom, and for some it's safety, and for some it's because home has never been there. They're not a house person. They don't have responsibilities at home or whatever, and you could really tell the people.
Some of us are just extroverts who needed to be around people.
And then there were people who needed to be around people and all that kind of thing. So I think because of the scale of the experiment.
They both just pulled the hugest faces at me.
I'm not one of them. But I think because we did it at scale, we got to see all of those things at once. People who don't like being in their own houses, the people who need to be with other people, the people who are like, I'm finally away from all the people. This is awesome. And so it kind of like was a grand scale experiment that we're actually all quite different, but it also showed that a number of us were fronting up at the office all the time. And that was not our peak place of work.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's talk a bit about gender. So I said before that this conversation is one that Danielle and I had as part of a Women in Leadership Summit. And so often work design and work flexibility becomes a kind of gendered discussion. Is that right? Is that fair? What are we missing?
Go, Caroline.
No.
I hate it. I hate it designed as through a gender lens. I hate it for heaps of reasons. It goes back to making flexibility not about designing work for outcomes and productivity and retention and recruitment, but about like giving the ladies something helpful so they can be more domestic. Sorry.
The generosity of the patriarchy.
The generosity of the patriarchy.
You may also do laundry while you work for the man.
Cheers, thanks. So partly that, partly because if we keep framing it like that, I mean, we all know that the equity and equality conversation doesn't happen unless men change their work behaviours as well in families. So I hate it being framed as a special little treat for the ladies on the basis that it stops men taking up flexible work when it's framed like that, and we don't change the game generally until everyone's kind of equally participating at home and at work.
Yeah.
And also for me, because like the gender component kills off what's something I'm really passionate about, which is chronic disease, disability and caring, which is the kind of massive saving to the economy because it's done for free.
Yeah.
And that flexible work, if you have to take someone to a doctor and, you know, I love
Consistently pick up a suspended kid from school.
Yep. I just love that when I work with medical professionals in a justice context, they're like, the court changed the date and yet you can get a text message from a hospital, like just ruining your whole week because they've changed the appointment by 5 hours without any. So like these systems, you are at the behest of those systems. You cannot control them. And if you can't fit your work around it, you can't work. And like if you have to be a certain like hot or cold or sit in a special chair, like these things determine whether you can contribute productive or not. And when we put it through a gender lens, we lose all the other parts of it. And so I didn't love the framing in the federal election debate in the media, which was like work from home good, work from home bad. Firstly, like, could we be more reductive? Secondly, the response was the ladies don't like it, so let's not do it. And I'm like, this is not about work design. It's not about anything. This has become something I think that is actually ultimately going to be very unhelpful for flexible work.
So why is it that the public cares more about flexibility in the public service? People aren't getting so worked up about where their insurance claim was processed. I changed health funds. I spent some time talking to a woman on the phone. She was clearly working from home. No dramas.
Well,
why is it in the public service that we're getting the heat about working from home?
Well, because people who pay their taxes are rightly, I think, sceptical about ensuring there is value for money. And they are not usually in conversations about, oh, well, what is the work value of this and how do I design that? Like they're just like, I want a person to be doing a thing and delivering me a service. And so like I don't mind that there's more scrutiny on the public service in these kinds of contexts. Like I wish it wasn't a kind of, you know, whatever, political football. But it's not, to me, it's like the big feels people have about the public service will change their flavour when people are feeling like the public service is doing the right thing by them. And so to me the answer is like let's focus on delivering, making ourselves
service.
better.
Yep.
You know, like I really feel that's the kind of response.
I think it's historic. I think it's a historic, and I think it's the same with that general flavour of cuts as well, which is there was a couple of public servants in my lineage where we mainly worked in pubs, but the ones who got public sector jobs had tenure. They had the special superannuation that gave them a defined benefit, and then when they died, their wife got a defined benefit. They couldn't be sacked. They got paid more, and it was a prized pig of a job. And it gave you these cushy benefits that no one else had. Newsflash. Dead, gone, buried, like a lot of the the evidence says that flexibility, for instance, is easier and there's more of it in the private sector than the public sector. Outside of the like for instance, South Australia, you don't get any extra superannuation. You just earn the same super as if you were working anywhere else. A lot of the cushiness, which I don't think necessarily led to productivity either. I'm not a defender of it, but we have whittled that away over the course of, I'd say, from the kind of late 80s, mid 90s, a lot of those benefits have kind of all been whittled away. And so, but I think the public still has a view,
romanticised notion
that everyone is overpaid, completely tenured, like has all these kind of perks.
I know they continue to have that view about parliamentary super, notwithstanding significant changes to parliamentary super arrangements.
You see that all the time.
Yeah.
Oh, well, he's got his super, and I'm always like, 2004, guys. It's been a long time
the gold
since
card. Like, no one's had a gold card for a while, buddy.
Not to mention the gold card gave you free train travel. Like, I think some of this stuff has been sticky, right? Like it's sticky from an a former era, and that's why the public has an interest in it, because their nana and then their mum and whatever else all said, oh, well, your cousin Sally, she worked in the public service. Do you know what that meant? She got 4 weeks holidays back when we all used to get 3. Like these kinds of things.
No, very fair. Very
is
fair.
a cultural Australian thing that I don't think stands up to a factual test anymore, but we kind of stick at it, which is why we're so quick to go, they're in their pajamas. I knew there were more perks.
Pajama perks. In fairness, I think pajamas are a perk, but whatever.
So do I.
I would not do a meeting on Teams if I could do it in person. I find Teams meetings so exhausting.
Really?
Yeah.
I find them so much less labour intensive.
I find them so labour intensive.
And there's like room.
I feel like there's
You're
a
on
lot
display?
of I'm on display and
You know, women, there's like they've done
Yes,
studies
I do know this.
about the energy levels. Women in particular, if you have your little video image up in the corner
so
of your
I turn
things,
mine off.
Yeah, women find it more exhausting to be on Teams because we're constantly self-scrutinising. Which, to my point, I wanted to say in response to the gender thing, maybe not a gender lens, but I'm always happy to put a patriarchy lens on it because patriarchy is the trick that hurts men and women.
Yep.
And I do feel like a little bit a patriarchy lens on this is helpful.
So we've talked a bit about where you're in your pajamas. But there's that conversation about autonomy kind of leads us to it's about more than where. Let's talk a bit about the when. Because one of the things that was so interesting about COVID, in particular, people working from home, was because there was no commute, people were working at different times of day. And that really showed up in peak water usage. So people were showering on average like 2 or 3 hours later. Like the whole population was showering later in the day. Because they could get up early, bang out a couple of hours of work that didn't require them to be on screen from like, you know, let's say 7 till 9. Then at 9, go have a shower, get yourself ready for your 10:30 team dial in. So it gave people lots more
I'm just glad they were
flexibility.
showering. Like,
I mean, I'm not convinced it'll work. But you know, I think it's worth us, if we're considering work design for the public service, thinking about the when as well as the where.
Oh, we're going to do right to disconnect here. Look.
oh, I'm going in a different direction.
Well, you go.
Oh, well, I just don't understand why Monday to Friday is so important to everybody. Like, so, and I'm about to make 450,000 enemies, by the way. This is a very outlier view, and I'm very well aware of that.
Go.
But I've just never, again, I do think my approach to work design does come from the fact that I spent formative years just working when work needed to be done.
Yep.
So I just have such a different head on it. But I just don't understand why, for lots of jobs, why they are so limited to Monday to Friday. And I mean, penalty rates are a real thing, but why I can't choose to like accept that my brain does not function after about 11 a.m. on a Friday. But Sunday night, man, that thing goes like the clappers as it prepares for the week. And I work for myself now, and so I can do all that to my heart's content. But I think it's really interesting that we are so limited in complicated worlds. And if I go back to family and complicated families and caring arrangements and whatever else, that 4 hours on a Sunday afternoon could never be considered a make-up job for needing Wednesday afternoons off for my physical therapy or whatever. And I understand that industrially and penalty rates, I realise I'm out there, but I don't know, like, why are we so stuck with this whole Monday to Friday?
Well, and one of the things I think that's really interesting is, you know, everyone will have good times of the day for them and their circadian rhythm and their families about when is best to do their deep work and when is best to do their lighter or more transactional or extroverty work. Like I'm a good extrovert in the morning. I become a less good extrovert as the day goes on.
But not too early in the morning.
Not too early in the morning. And what has been fascinating now that I work for myself as well is being able to design my day around the times that I know I'm going to be best placed to do a certain type of task.
And so I could do that. Then I got stuck in a completely unreformed 9 to 5. Like my first boss when I came back into the public service used to like write down on a Post-it note the time that you came in.
Oh my God.
I used to have one of those little clicky things that you clicked in. Yeah.
Oh, no. So he wanted to check that the clicky thing was lining up with
right.
the... Anyway.
An extra layer of
No
compliance.
time card fraud.
No. And so like this idea that there was a massive difference between 8:30 and 8:45 and 9:05 and all this kind of crap. So I had to slot myself into that for 13 years, which just did not sit comfortably.
Yeah.
And then back in this world.
Yeah.
Good plan.
Yeah.
Right. And I have that control, but also that's because there's just you, right? Like how do you run a team like that?
That's right. So 2 thoughts. One, I think you need a certain amount of synchronicity, right? So
people
I
do
don't
have
think
to
it's
have-
Monday to Friday, but I think you need to have a certain amount of synchronicity in your teams where people are working at broadly the same time, at least a couple of days a week, so everyone can kind of connect and whatever. Like I think but that's just, as you would say, good leadership. Secondly, and in fact, someone noticed this the other day. I've always worked part-time since I've had children. I've been 0.8 or 0.9 my whole career.
I mean, you've always been paid part-time.
Yeah, can we not have this argument on the air?
Well, and so
I've never
do.
understood why you do that when you work 40 hours a week plus.
Well, and it's like yes. So this is the guilty. It's the reflection, right? Like on the one hand, I think it is very helpful to have been out and proud as a part-time senior executive, and I know that it has helped people who have worked for me to ask for working part-time.
Absolutely agree.
Right?
Really
like it is an important role modelling aspect. On the other hand, of course, I always worked more than full-time hours. But so, in fairness, did every full-time executive I've ever met. They have also always worked more than full-time hours. So,
Mate, you bloody good value though.
I've always said that. Super cheap. Bring me on, I'm super cheap. I think there's something interesting there about our abilities to kind of juggle those things. But on balance, I am happy with the choice that I've made, which has always been able to say I religiously left, early 2 days a week to pick up my kids from school, spend the time with them. Sure, I definitely wanted to kill them at the end of that, but that's fine. Sure, I definitely worked those hours at another point in time, usually, but not always. And I had no guilt and I had no sideways guilt with my peers, and I really felt like it was helping other people do a different thing. But I maintain ambivalence about that.
Do you know who else didn't feel guilty?
Who?
The team I had who religiously came in and worked 8:45 to 5 o'clock, and they had worked together for a long time, and the first thing they did was went and got the free 4 copies of the paper and their cereal. And they read the paper whilst they had their cereal. Then they went collectively to get a coffee.
Yep.
Then they came and started their day. Then they went for an hour's lunch.
This is a well-made point.
And came back with some shopping or whatever. And then at 5 o'clock, a bell rang and everybody stood up and left.
That is a well-made point.
They did not feel guilty because they were at work.
Mm-hmm.
But also, Danielle, you can't have your cake and eat it too here. Like either you cared about the outcomes that they were producing as their manager, or you cared about the fact that they were eating cereal and reading the newspaper.
I get the
I had a
sense they
problem with
weren't
the
doing.
Right, so talk about that.
Alison.
That's a very
well-made point.
Well, I suppose my other problem was this is where we get to that culture and competitiveness. They were the first. There was newer people in that team who were young mothers.
Yeah.
And these were the people who would sneer at the flies in, hair in a messy bun, 9:05, rips through more work than you could possibly imagine, never has a lunch break, 10:04 is childcare's called, or if I don't catch the train, I don't get there before they close. And they'd be like, oh, she's never at work. Oh, it's 4:10 and I'm trying to find her and she's gone.
Yeah, the answer is we just don't want people to be dicks, right?
Right.
You're
right. I don't care if you want to be there. You're right. It's not about that, but it's more that thing that
If I'm
Caroline was
sitting there
talking
and
about.
eating my
Guilt.
cereal, but I'm turning it out, then stuff you.
Yes, for sure. No. You're dead right. And if you want to be at work in that sense of it's somewhere that you like hanging out in long periods of time. But again, if we're counting hours in that old-fashioned, it's not how long you're there. It's how much work you're doing.
Well, and so really interestingly, there's a lot of movement in the private sector about reforming work design, particularly the days and hours that you are there. So here in South Australia, Santos, a really significant petroleum and gas company. Is it 4 days a week? I think technically it's actually 9 days a fortnight, not 4 days a week.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So same pay as if you were full-time,
Yep.
less hours.
Interesting. But aren't all the legal firms like, threatening to staple their people to their desks? Like I thought there
Yeah,
was
but all the evidence is you actually get more productivity because you get people, waste less time faffing around.
Yeah.
Faff is such an interesting question around the value of faffing. So I think as someone who's never loved small talk, communal kitchens and a range of other things, I'm a bad faffer. It's like if you were to list off my skill sets as a leader, that would not be like amongst them. Like drop me in a room with a bunch of strangers at work who have got a big problem to fix, but your best friend will solve it all. That will be like bosom buds by the end of it.
Yeah. Do you know what Neil's puzzle is?
No.
Yeah.
Like make me wander aimlessly. And no, I think Alison's about to tell me I'm supposed to be a better faffer.
I'm just pulling a face here because I think even in the world of outcomes focus, right, for all the years I spent in and around intergovernmental relations and other places, and even I went to this workshop the other day, the single most productive conversation I had in the workshop was 5 minutes over a Danish for afternoon tea. If I had been on Teams, I wouldn't have had that.
Yep.
And when pre-COVID, the Commonwealth were pushing everyone to use, what is that teleconference thing?
Oh, telepresence.
Telepresence. And I was really upset about it because a lot of the big negotiations I had been involved in would never have worked if we had not, over tea and coffee, been able to have some sideline conversations that weren't the official at the table, I'm here representing my government, but were just a kind of like, hey, is that really so important to you? Do you think you could move on this? We could probably move on that.
Imagine being accused of a crime in a similar context, Alison, and where you would normally be at the bench and be able to whisper things to your lawyer.
Yeah, exactly.
You're both on like telepresence and you can't hear it properly and English isn't your first language or whatever else. So there are like huge limitations that I will like absolutely like accept for that. But back to the work redesign with Santos, like we are in a workforce shortage, right? So this is the other thing. The redesign of work is happening at a time when it's like, I'll just go somewhere else and I can, which was just not what we had up until then. I stayed in jobs with flexibility far beyond when I wanted to be in them just because like it might be taken away from me if I went somewhere else more interesting. And that is less of a thing now. Even schools, so there are some Catholic schools designing work where you can work from home once a week as a full-time teacher because what they're doing is scraping out all of the 45 minutes you might get for this bit of paperwork, this bit of lesson prep and whatever else, and they're consolidating it all. They're trialling it. They don't know if it's going to work yet, but they do accept that from this equity around frontline.
I'll tell you what it's going to work for, attraction and retention.
But they're trying to figure out what works on the ground and stuff.
Yeah.
And I think it's really like so this question of like frontline versus not frontline, like they're having a crack at frontline, right?
Yeah.
Can they work from home? Who knows? Maybe not. Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's sort of come in for a landing here and just talk a bit about managers and leadership in a hybrid or work from home environment. What do good managers do differently? How do you do it differently?
I just think it's about intentionality, right? Like it's about what's the work, what do we need as a team to deliver the work, what works well for us, like it's open conversations, all of the things. I started a new job recently where my predecessor had made a kind of very clear decision about everyone must be in 3 days a week and, having a conversation with my team about what did that mean and why 3 and not 2? And, it became very clear and we've delivered heaps more work with our 2 days a week in the last year. Like I just think, but it requires, we then also have quarterly times where we all come together from across Australia, it's just intentional.
Yeah.
You have to be a good communicator. So it's actually much easier. I saw during COVID some senior managers hide from their teams really easily when we were when we were working from home. And so there's a couple of things you need to step into your role. Like if you don't want to be a manager and a leader, if you're managing flexibility,
if you're doing
if you're dodging your own staff and stuff. And so that means the leader above you has to really know if you're doing a good job of it or not. the other thing is we have to be really much more explicit in our communication, which I think we have to do across the board. I think it covers neurodiversity, cultural things, all sorts of things for us to be less wishy-washy. And in the public service, it's scary to write things down sometimes.
Yep.
Like there was a whole controversy in New South Wales where the government had their position on ending COVID-era work from home and and reverting to industrial relations flexibility, which was in their agreement.
Yeah.
And the Secretary of Health, the DepSec of Health sent something out, as did lots of people saying, don't panic, like this is okay, and if you work from home and you've got your agreement with your boss. Unfortunately, that DepSec was the Premier's nephew. And so it created this kind of unnecessary wah about like, oh, what's going on here? No one understands. And so the challenge is when we write things down. So if we're really explicit when you're managing hybrid teams, that often means writing down because you can't stick your head out. Hey, everyone, Min's asked us to wah. It often means you have to write things down that you wouldn't otherwise, which can sometimes really challenge you because, of course, everything you write down can be public information, but it is really essential to be much more explicit and you are going to have to write more down. So if those are things that you struggle to do as a manager, you will find managing flexible and hybrid teams harder, and you've got to know what you're delivering. Do you know how often I still go places who might need to do something and it's like, okay, what are your core functions? Like what portfolios,
what are the things
that we do here? And it can be very hard. So if you cannot we do this and that, and it's done quarterly and whatever else, will be hard for you to figure out if you land in the plane.
Yeah.
If you don't know what you're doing.
I think the other thing we should probably just touch on here in terms of work from home for the public service was the demand of, I think, mostly property owners, if we're honest.
Yeah. I was thinking.
No. To have all the public servants back into the office.
Economic stimulus.
Yeah, so that they could buy their sandwiches.
In the CBD?
In the CBD where these people had invested all their money. And what was interesting about that was all the data was people were still buying their sandwiches. They were just buying it in suburbs, not...
Yeah.
I thought markets responded to supply and demand. It is my understanding of capitalism.
Sometimes you make an investment that turns out when circumstances change to no longer be such a winner.
Like if you were a candlestick maker.
Yeah. Life was a bit rubbish.
Like life at one point, economic and social change happened to you.
Yeah.
And we didn't need so many candlesticks. That whole electricity thing became quite interesting, gas lamps. So, but the gas lamp people, man, they got a whole new life form. I find it very challenging to it's like a socialising the losses kind of idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I am challenged by the idea that it's not the way we have to be in the CBD or not. It's just like, that is not we need to design the purpose of the CBD and the purpose of work, not.
Or you need to be, I guess I'm thinking about those small country towns where the physical presence of a particular public servant makes a real difference to, are there enough kids in the school or are there enough whatever. So I think you just need to be honest about what the drivers are in particular contexts.
I don't know, Alison's trying to wind us up, but that also gets to regional development, the life of our suburbs.
Yep.
Again, if we end up in a reductive, if you're in your pajamas, you're not working hard enough, we are going to miss a generational opportunity to decide whether if your job is processing insurance claims, why on earth can't you do that from a regional or even a remote area if you have a stable internet connection?
A good point.
And therefore, we could we have a generational opportunity to look at how we manage our environment, our traffic, our infrastructure. But if we
cities are for and how we plan them and
all of that kind of thing. But if we're going to end up in a punch up over, I saw someone once wrote an email out of a caravan, we are missing every chance for a proper
Danielle
conversation. Boundaries.
All right. So I think, just to kind of wrap this one up, I think one of the things about work from home is it is a lens through which we are thinking and talking about trust and change and control, but also system design and work design. Let's leave it there for today. Till next time.
Just some appropriately bureaucratic disclaimers. While we've tried to be as thorough in our research as busy full-time jobs and lives allow, we definitely don't guarantee that we've got all the details right. Please feel free to email us corrections, episode suggestions or anything else at thewestminstertraditionpod@gmail.com. Thanks to Pampot Audio for our intro and outro music. Till next time.